Okay. Judge, we need to prefer voting fairness as a criterion in this round for the simple reason that it's the most accurate criterion for judging election fairness, right? So what we are doing here today is arguing should we change the election from the status quo? If so, how? That is what we are doing. So the core question then is going to be, how do we determine whether or not it's a good idea to change from the status quo? My opponents are making a reasonable sounding argument that we should factor in all the costs and benefits, blah, 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 blah. However, that's simply not true. Because if it were true that we could factor in all the costs and benefits and to judge this round accordingly, then it might very well make sense to have a move to an election format that does not represent the will of the people at all, if you can show, in fact, that some net benefits occur. That's what that's the bind that my opponents have painted themselves into here. They find themselves arguing in favor of lawless and unfair mechanisms of voting, and justifying those mechanisms of voting with predictions of good outcomes. There's nothing predictive about the bad parts, though, is there? We know for a fact it's not fair. It doesn't accurately represent the will of the people. It's not, therefore, democratic, really. We know that it is at best arbitrary and at worst rigged in the current situation. Of course it is. It has to be. How do we know? Well, because mathematically, the way that we vote doesn't actually reflect the will of the people. That's what mathematicians have come up with these theorems for, to help us to codify that, to understand what that means, really means. What my opponent is trying to tell you is ignore the facts, ignore the math, ignore the reality that we already have statistical analyses that tell us whether or not a vote is going to produce the most accurate and fair outcome. They're going to say, let's be less accurate. Let's be less fair in order to reach for our speculative, predicted good outcomes. Well, it doesn't matter how much of a sure thing that horse race seems to be. When you bet your home on it and you lose, it's too much of a consequence. So that's why you don't ever take that chance in the first place. Now that's what my opponents are doing here. They're gambling with our home. They're gambling with our country. They're gambling with our lives. They're trying to tell you it doesn't matter if the government engaged in illegal behavior. It doesn't matter if the systems being used are fair or not. It doesn't matter if, in fact, rights are being violated or upheld. All that matters is their magical predictions for whatever their impacts are. That is not a reason to prefer their framework, Judge. That's a reason to spit on it.